All right, ready for a deep dive?
Always. What do we got today?
Today we're tackling someone who was a romantic and a rebel, a philosopher, but also a captivating storyteller, Simone de Beauvoir.
Oh, excellent. And you've given us quite the collection to work with.
Right. Novels, essays, we've even got some personal diary entries to unpack. I'm excited about this one.
You know, what always gets me about Beauvoir is how you can see her ideas developing through all these different formats.
Yeah.
The way her personal life, especially her love life, clashes with her own ideas about freedom. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and having all these different types of sources, it's like we get to see multiple sides of her, a 3D view almost.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's dive in. You included her diary of a philosophy student, and I have to admit, I geeked out a little when I saw that in the stack. Yeah. I mean, this is Beauvoir before the fame, right? When she was still just figuring things out, wrestling with life's big questions.
And wrestle she did. Trust me, these aren't your average student diaries, stressing about exams.
Right. So what kind of things was she grappling with back then?
Well, in one entry, July 7th, 1927, she writes about being in love with her cousin Jacques.
Juicy.
Right. And she says she had sacrificed her exams for him, but she adds, "But not my written work if I can do one, nor myself." Even then, she was fiercely independent, protective of her own mind, her own path.
Wow. That's a powerful statement. It's like she's saying, love is important, but it can't consume my entire identity.
Exactly.
Which, knowing Beauvoir and her philosophy, seems to be a recurring theme, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It pops up everywhere in her work. And it's important to remember the intellectual environment she was in at the time. We're talking early 20th century, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sartre, Heidegger, they're all shaking things up, questioning everything.
It was a very dynamic time for philosophy.
Very much so. And Beauvoir is right there in the thick of it, absorbing these ideas, but also pushing back against the expectations of what a woman, a philosopher, should be.
Yeah, it makes you think how much of her own life, that push and pull between love, societal pressure, her own ambition, how much of that fueled her later work, like The Second Sex, for example.
I think the connection is definitely there. And speaking of those tensions between love and freedom, we have to talk about She Came to Stay.
Oh, yes. The novel you included.
Such a tangled web of love, jealousy, really makes you question how well you can ever truly know another person.
It's one of those books where the emotional intensity just leaps off the page.
Right.
I remember this one line, Francoise, one of the main characters, is trying to understand this other character, Xavier, and she thinks, what exactly did she want? Francoise had to guess. She had to guess everything. What Pierre felt, what was good, what was evil, and what she herself really and truly wanted. It's like, even in our closest relationships, there's this element of mystery, this unknowable other.
Exactly. And that right there, that idea of the other, that's crucial to understanding so much of Beauvoir's work, both her fiction and her philosophical writing. How do we define ourselves, not in isolation, but in relation to other people?
And particularly in relation to lovers, right?
Right, because those relationships, they can liberate us, but they can also confine us, which, is something Beauvoir knew a lot about.
Okay, so we've got this simmering tension between love and freedom, the individual versus society, and then enter World War II. Talk about upping the stakes. And of course, you included her wartime diary, which feels like a whole other level of personal...
It's almost like a different voice from her student diaries. You can feel the war weighing on her.
Right, like this urgency in her writing and a real awareness of, well, how fragile things are, how easily our freedoms can be crushed by forces outside our control.
And she experienced that firsthand with the fall of France.
Absolutely.
I was blown away by that anecdote where she's at the German military headquarters in La Flèche, June 1940.
Oh, right.
She describes seeing the German soldiers, totally victorious, strutting around, while these defeated French refugees are huddled nearby. It's such a stark image, a powerful illustration of just how quickly power can shift, and how in these situations, individual lives, they're just caught in the middle of these massive historical forces.
It's heavy stuff, and yet even amidst the chaos, she's still grappling with these huge philosophical questions, how do we define morality when the world seems to have gone mad?
Exactly.
Right.
How do we even begin to understand concepts like individual agency when surrounded by so much suffering? It's like, is there even such a thing as a moral choice when you're just trying to survive?
Right. And that kind of leads us to the ethics of ambiguity, which thankfully you also included in this stack.
It's fascinating to see how her wartime experiences, her observations of human nature under such extreme circumstances, how that fed into this book.
Because she doesn't shy away from the tough questions in that one.
Not at all. She dives headfirst into that existential dilemma. On one hand, you have the absurdity of existence, the fact that, in many ways, there is no inherent meaning, and yet, on the other hand, we still have to find a way to live ethically, to make choices that matter, even when it feels like the world is falling apart around you.
It's like, how do we hold on to any sense of hope, of purpose, when faced with such darkness? It's a question that I think a lot of people were asking themselves during and after the war.
Absolutely. And Beauvoir doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
No, but she's willing to sit with the discomfort, to wrestle with those big questions. And that's what makes her work so powerful, so relevant, even today.
It's that willingness to be honest about the complexities, the contradictions of human experience that makes her so compelling.
And what I love is that even when she's dealing with these huge philosophical ideas, she never loses sight of the personal, of how these questions play out in individual lives.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this particular deep dive so fascinating. We've got these deeply personal diary entries, then these novels exploring complex relationships, and now we're moving into her more explicitly philosophical works.
It's like we're getting the full Simone de Beauvoir experience. And speaking of full experiences, we have to talk about The Second Sex. I mean, come on. This is a game changer. I mean, this is the book that really put her on the map as a feminist icon.
It did. It really did. And for good reason. This book is monumental.
I mean, 1949, she's dismantling this whole idea that woman is this fixed category, that it's all biology.
Right. It's like she's saying, hold on a minute. So much of what we think of as feminine, it's not innate, it's learned, it's imposed on women.
Socially constructed, as they say.
Exactly. And that she takes it a step further. She connects these ideas about gender to, well, everything. Freedom, authenticity, what it means to be human. It's huge.
It's like that line, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. I feel like everyone's heard that quote.
Rightly so. I mean, she's challenging centuries of assumptions about women, what they're capable of, what their place is in the world.
And it's a conversation that's still going on today, which is incredible when you think about it. Almost 75 years later, and we're still grappling with these ideas.
Because she hit on something so fundamental. You know, she's saying, if we can question these categories that have been imposed on us, well, maybe we can start to imagine a different way of being, new ways of relating to each other. It's exciting.
Right. And a little bit scary, too, if we're being honest, to think about, like, what if we could rewrite the rules?
It's that ambiguity again, that thread that runs through all her work. The idea that there are no easy answers when it comes to, well, being human.
And that's what makes her so relevant even today.
Right.
I mean, we're still asking those same questions about freedom, about responsibility. How do we find meaning in a world that often feels pretty absurd?
Absolutely. We're all searching for those answers in our own way.
It makes you wonder, what would Beauvoir make of the world today?
Oh, what a question. I think, on the one hand, she'd be thrilled with the progress we've made, you know, on gender equality, social justice, all of that. But I also think she'd be pushing for more. She was never one to rest on her laurels.
Never satisfied, always pushing the boundaries.
Exactly.
Well, I have to say, this has been quite the deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from her personal diaries to those intense novels, all the way to The Second Sex.
It's been a whirlwind. But it's amazing how it's all connected, isn't it? You can see these threads of her thought weaving through all these different formats, different periods of her life.
And for those of you listening, we hope this has inspired you to, do some exploring of your own. Pick up one of her books, maybe start a conversation with a friend, because the best deep dives, they don't really end when the episode's over, right?
They send you off on your own adventures.
Exactly. So keep those big questions simmering, keep those conversations going. And until next time,